You're listening to Coming of Cage, a Nicolas Cage podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Coming of Cage podcast. I am your host, Derek, and I have got my partner in crime, Ryan, with me.
Hello.
Hello, hello. This week, we are discussing the 1987 film Moonstruck, starring Nick Cage and Cher. She actually gets top billing in Moonstruck from 1987. And the way we've been doing this, if you don't follow the show, welcome to the Coming of Cage podcast, where we discuss every movie Nick Cage has ever been in by random selection. And I'm sure we'll talk about a TV show if he ever shows up in one. There's a couple in the works. And this is episode 11, and we're talking Moonstruck. And what Ryan does is he takes notes when he watches his movie. I stuff my face with popcorn and snacks, and Ryan takes diligent notes. And then we go through those notes and discuss them.
Yeah, that's accurate. I will say this movie didn't have nearly as many notes as a lot of other movies. I think because, just to get it out of the way, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I had never seen it before.
Me neither.
So this is our first time viewing. So, it may be a well-known movie to other movie aficionados or romantic comedy enthusiasts, but for us, not something we'd seen before. But I very much enjoyed this movie. And I was having trouble finding notes for it, but I did find some. But I do, real quick, before we get started on Moonstruck, I did actually, and this is a true story, not making it up, I did have a dream this week, and something I don't talk about much is I have a little dream journal where I write out, to keep track of the date and dreams that are out of the ordinary. Like I have some dreams that are recurring and whatnot, and I don't really keep those, in the journal. But I did have a Nick Cage dream this week. I didn't remember it super well when I woke up, but I remembered enough of it to at least have a semi-readable small paragraph, a couple of sentences, whatever. So I would like to read that.
Please.
This is on September 25th, 2022. I was on a ship of some kind, and President Biden showed up on the ship.
Like a boat?
I don't know if it was an airship or a boat, but okay. Because he wanted to talk to me about recognizing my worship of Nick Cage as a religion by the government. Later, I got to meet Nick Cage and tell him about the podcast and how our rating system works and how his movie that was the biggest surprise to me so far.
Which was what?
Which was at the point I had this dream was It Could Happen to You. But that may have changed with Moonstruck. So,
ooh.
But yeah, I just thought that was a fun little thing. If I have any more Nick Cage dreams, I'll make sure to share them on the podcast, assuming that they're safe for work.
Well, I have a question, if I may. So were you running this Cage religion? Like, was it your religion? Is that why Biden was talking to you?
I don't really know.
Okay.
I just know that we were on a ship, and for some reason the president was there to talk to me about it. So I assume I'm a high-ranking official of some kind in the Church of Cage, the one true God. But you know what? Dreams are dreams, man. I can't fill in many more blanks than what I've told you, other than just like assuming things, because I literally wrote down everything I remembered about it.
Well, that's fair. It does go to show just how important this show is to your subconscious.
I mean, I honestly think that I wouldn't have had that dream without this show, which isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. Like,
I think it's a good thing.
It's just a thing, but it shows that my mind has been somewhat focused on our one true God lately and his meaning in my life. So, that's fun.
Yeah.
You weren't there though, Derek, which I thought was a little disappointing.
That's sad.
I know. I figured you'd be my right-hand man.
Well, maybe I was steering the ship.
You probably were driving. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was that. I just wanted to I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought it was fun.
No, it's very interesting. So Moonstruck stars Cher, Nick Cage, and is directed by Norman Jewison, who also directed the original Rollerball, which is nothing like Moonstruck, and The Hurricane, which is also nothing like Moonstruck. So, this feels like a little outside of his normal kind of dramatic, intense realm, but nonetheless, we're here. Cher is the reason Nick Cage got the role. The studio did not like his test screenings at all and did not want him a part of the production, but Cher did. She loved him. She really wanted him for the role.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard that it was something that she watched one of his other movies and it was like watching a 2-hour car accident, she said. That's literally like something along those lines is what she said as why she wanted Nick Cage, which, I mean, if that doesn't describe what it's like watching some of these Cage movies, then, I mean, I don't know what does.
I will say that this is the youngest I've ever seen Nick Cage in a movie.
And he looked great, didn't he? He's a handsome dude in this movie.
He was thinner, though. Like, he gets jacked in the later 90s.
He was pretty jacked in this movie, but it was more like cut.
Yeah.
You know, like a
slim,
wiry type of guy. Yeah.
But I know I'm going to go out and I'm just going to say it. I think he became more attractive as he aged. I think he's a better looking guy later. Just that's me.
Fair enough. I mean, that's personal preference. I definitely see the appeal of a younger Nick Cage in this movie too. He was definitely very handsome and a good leading man look.
All like sweaty and glistening in the bread oven basement.
Oh yeah. Okay, so before we get too deep into it, I also want to say that I had no idea. Like, so I had seen some clips from this movie, some of the more extreme KG moments, but I didn't know anything about what this movie was. Like, I didn't even read the like the fact that it was a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting more of like just a straight up romantic comedy, like Notting Hill or like something like that. It was like more seriously romantic,
right,
and less comedy. This I could not figure out. Like, it felt like more of a straight up comedy to me for a lot of it, and so it was just very jarring. Not going into it, not knowing. I didn't watch a trailer. Nope. I didn't really know anything about it. Even the clips that I had seen, I didn't know were from this movie.
Well, right. So I had seen the extremely famous Cher clip of smacking a guy and saying "snap out of it." Right. It's an iconic shot, right? Everybody knows that scene. It's even in like the top 100 most influential movie scenes or something like that. And I didn't know she was slapping Nick Cage. So that was a fun surprise.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure my mom would be very proud that I finally watched this because she always loved Cher. And the description on HBO Max where I watched it didn't really help prepare me for the movie because this is how HBO describes the film. Cher, so not her character name, Cher goes from frumpy to fabulous as a widow living with her family in Brooklyn who falls into a full moon romance with Nicolas Cage.
Yes, I did read that ahead of time. And so I was like, okay, good description. A good description, I guess. I'm not really sure, but I guess we'll get into it. And even like IMDb's description isn't that great. So, I mean, I don't know that I feel like people didn't know how to categorize this movie. Because none of the descriptions really do it justice.
Right. Maybe it's just it's been around for so long and it's so iconic that people are like, yeah, everybody knows what this is about.
Yeah, like nobody's searching for Moonstruck unless they've seen it before.
Except for us.
Except for us, apparently. And I will say that it's at 7.1 out of 10 on IMDb, which I feel like is pretty low.
Yeah.
In my opinion, based on what I saw. Yeah. But maybe we'll get into the ratings and stuff later.
That's fair.
Okay, so Moonstruck. My first note is When the Moon Hits Your Eye, because that song I've probably heard in like 30 different movies, and it's very rarely a good sign.
Well, according to the notes, that was a replacement. They had a different song in that I guess people really didn't like, and so they replaced it with something more iconic.
It's not that I don't like that song. It's just like overused, I think. In movies,
it's definitely used a lot. Maybe it wasn't overused in 1987.
In 1987, yeah, that's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
And it threw me off for a while. Like until Nick Cage mentions the opera, I couldn't understand why that song was in the movie at all.
Yeah,
that was
weird. There's a lot of stuff in the movie that I still don't understand why it was in the movie, but I'm sure we'll get into that. Get to it. Yeah. But that song, I think the first song, funny fact, I think the first time I remember hearing that song in a movie was, I think, Grumpier Old Men. You ever see that movie?
No, I never saw that one.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. We won't get into that. Okay, my second note is Dick Hyman. This is the name of somebody in the cast that pops up during the opening credits.
Oh, like someone's real name?
That's somebody's actual name in the opening credits. And I'm not to make fun of somebody's name. Dick Hyman, if you're still around, I'm sorry if this offends you, Richard. But yeah, that was just funny to me because I'm 8 years old, apparently.
Yeah, I missed that. I'm not sure who.
It popped up in big letters on the screen, and I immediately wrote it down. So,
okay. Oh, the music. He did the music.
Yeah, there you go. Dick Hyman, you did a great job on the music.
Yeah, he did the music. He's no.
I hope you had a long and beautiful career in Hollywood if you're still alive.
Oh man. I was gonna pull up his
IMDb. I feel like Dick Hyman broke a lot of barriers in music.
With this film.
Penetrated a lot of force fields.
Wow. Let's move on.
Okay, sorry, I could keep going on that,
we're gonna
but
move on.
You're the real dad in this. So you should be coming up with the dad jokes, not me. But
okay,
we're
gonna move on.
This guy looks like a mortician.
He was a mortician.
Yeah, he was a mortician. But I mean, like, if you just showed me a picture of that guy that was a mortician, and I actually, when I wrote that note, thought he would be a bigger character in the movie, but he wasn't. But yeah, he showed up, and if you just showed me a picture of him, I would have said that guy's a mortician. That was basically what I was getting at.
Yeah, because like at the beginning of the movie, we get to see Cher, Loretta is her character's name, and I guess she does like accounting for several small businesses, including a funeral home and a florist. Maybe they know each other. I don't know. And I guess her aunt and uncle.
This is kind of our intro to, or like our beginning of our intro to the character.
Yeah.
And I want to say I am a little disappointed that Cher didn't do more acting because I thought she was really great in this.
Yeah, she did a good number of movies in the 80s and the very early 90s and then just stopped.
Apparently I haven't seen many of them, but this was, I think, my first movie I've ever seen Cher in, and I thought she was wonderful. Okay, my next note I think happened, so we get a scene coming up with her soon-to-be fiance on a date. And he's talking about a guy that comes back later in the movie that has a fight with a younger girl in this like really, really fancy restaurant.
Mm-hmm. The dad from Frasier.
What is it? Yeah. I don't know. I didn't watch much Frasier.
Yeah, John Mahoney. Yeah.
But I have seen him in other stuff. So, I mean, couldn't pinpoint him, though. Maybe that's where I saw him from. But he makes a comment that this guy can't control his woman and it's embarrassing. And I was like, nah. That's not great.
Yeah, I was waiting for Loretta to react to that in some type of meaningful way. And then
me too.
I guess later in the movie, you find out that she's kind of resigned to her position and she's kind of given up on trying to find love and things like that because her husband. So she's a widow, right? Her husband died. He literally got hit by a bus. And so she believes very much that she has bad luck. And I think just later we're supposed to be like, oh, okay, this is just her life and she's accepted it.
Right. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that's like that. That's just unexpected that's a thing that happened in this universe. And I'm sure we'll get into that here shortly, at least one big one. But yeah, her ex got hit by a bus. And so she's a widow now.
But now her fiance, Johnny, like he's a bit of a putz. I mean,
you know what? Here's the thing though, like, so the whole basis of this movie, spoiler alert, is that she like meets Nick Cage's character and falls in love with him or whatever, and they have their ending. But really, he's not that bad of a guy. I mean, that comment isn't great about can't control his woman, but throughout the movie, he's not a terrible guy. He's not like a wonderful boyfriend, but I mean, compared to a lot of other movies that we've seen with Nick Cage in them, I mean, where everybody is a kind of a piece of crap, this one, he wasn't that bad, really. And actually, Nick Cage's character was kind of a turd in this movie. He was great, and I loved him, don't get me wrong, but he was like, he was not a good person.
No, Johnny is just kind of a sap, kind of a putz. And yeah, I mean, that remark that he makes is probably the worst thing that he does in the movie. But he's not very thoughtful either. So like we're at this restaurant and he's proposing to Loretta, to Cher's character, and he doesn't get on a knee, which she has him do, and I think that scene's really cute. It's pretty funny. He gets like on both knees and like shuffles over to her. It's pretty funny. But like he doesn't have a ring, even though like he had prepared to do this because he had talked to the waiter, Bobo, I think is his name, to like prepare like champagne and stuff like that. So like he knew he was going to do it, but he's got no ring. He's got no like thought process to how he wants to get it done. Right. And then he's boom off to Sicily to see his dying mother. He just feels very like aloof.
Yeah,
That's the word.
I'd agree. Yeah. And I mean, yeah. And he like calls out for dessert, like the dessert tray, which doesn't end up actually meaning anything. I thought maybe there's going to be a ring in one of the desserts or something.
Right. Yes, me too.
But then that doesn't actually mean anything. One other bigger, broader thing I want to touch on too, that will probably come into play throughout our discussion here, is that this isn't just a romantic comedy. This is actually like more specific than that, an Italian romantic comedy, because they like go really, really heavy on what I perceive as Italian stereotypes. And maybe they're not stereotypes. Maybe it's just like a thing that is well known that all Italians do, or most Italian, I don't know. But like the talking with the hands is really big. The amount of Italian like names, Castorini, Camerari, Capomaggi, there's so many, just like everybody is very Italian in this movie.
Yeah, the talking with hands thing is a very Northeastern trait too. Like my family really has that trait. Like I've toned it down. I've worked really hard to tone it down over the years. So that's a very New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia kind of thing. But
I've also seen it as an Italian stereotype, so it's probably kind of doubled up in this.
Well, her dad, Cosmo, is like the quintessential kind of Italian dad figure in a movie like this.
Yeah.
I made because my wife's Italian, and I made a joke to her because she didn't get to watch it with me. And I came upstairs and I was talking to her about it. I was like, I don't know, this might be the most Italian movie I've ever seen.
I mean, yes, yeah. And honestly, it makes me wonder if like Italian people would like this movie, like enjoy this movie even more than we did, or if they would actually like find fault with it, that it like fell into stereotypes so much. I don't know.
It's a good question. I'm pretty sure Ray liked it, so we didn't go into too much detail, but
I thought you said she didn't watch it.
She didn't watch it with me this time, but she'd seen it before.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So yeah, and you kind of touched on this, but my next note was this guy doesn't know how proposals work.
No idea.
He had to tell her to get, or she had to tell him to like, where's the ring? And then she had to ask him to get down on a knee. Like,
though, to be fair, so Nick Cage's character's name is Ronnie, Johnny's brother.
Yeah, exactly.
He proposes the same way.
Everything feels like a joke in this movie. Yeah. Like everything's a joke, which is fine. I just wasn't expecting it.
But like he proposes the same way. He doesn't get down on one knee. He takes his brother's pinky ring to propose.
But at least she doesn't have to prompt him for that.
No, that's true. But she doesn't even prompt him to get on his knees. He just stands there.
Right, but I'm saying that she had to prompt Johnny to get on the knee and to get the ring, but she did not have to prompt Ronnie to get the ring.
That's true.
But yes, he didn't get on a knee either. My next note is she's very thoughtful. That was a theme throughout this whole movie. It felt a little out of place with like the comedy aspects of the movie, but she's just a very thoughtful character in like, a super real feeling way. Like everybody feels like, at least when I watch this movie, it made me go, man, I wish everybody could have somebody like that in their life, because she's like, she cares about like your medication and like the food you're eating, and not to eat this food because you're going to get on a plane, and like to wear this hat because your head gets cold. She knows your head gets cold, and like, there's just so many like little things that she does. It just makes her super thoughtful, and I think it does a really good job of making you like her and make you root for her, even though based on the things that happen in this movie, she's not that great of a person either. She's kind of crappy, like in It Could Happen to You and some of these other ones.
Well, that's the thing.
It does make her a better character, I think.
She's a great character. She's very thoughtful. She gets people. I think that's one of the key pieces, is she really is good at understanding the people she's interacting with and knowing where they're coming from. Which I guess she's very empathic, probably would be the appropriate way to phrase that. And to that other point about like crappy characters, like really just Rose, which Loretta's mother, played by Olympia Dukakis, who's probably my favorite character in the movie. But aside from Rose, and then the grandfather, who I can't remember his name. I think he's just like, he's credited as old.
The guy that's walking the dogs.
Yeah, the dog guy. Yeah. Like everybody else is crappy except those two. They're like the
I
only two
know.
decent people in the movie.
I swear this is a running theme in like almost all of the Nick Cage movies we've reviewed, is that almost everybody in the movie is just a giant turd.
Though, okay, I guess her aunt and uncle are totally fine. They don't do anything.
The main characters, I
Yeah.
should say, in a lot of these movies.
But
I guess Family Man, not everybody was a jerk in that movie, but
there's a lot of jerks in these movies. But like in the core, right? Like Cosmo, her dad, is like trash in this movie. Throughout most of the movie, he's kind of just a jerk, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and later we find out that he's, you know, cheating on his wife and everything like that, which makes it even worse. But he's like been a jerk the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, and then you've got the whole Johnny and Ronnie thing, and Loretta's involved in that. And it's just a weird triangle thing. And the whole movie only takes place over like 4 days.
I know. It's a very short time period.
Yeah. Right. Because you've got day one is, you know, the proposal on the flight. Day two is the phone call where she forgot to go call Ronnie. So she goes and sees Ronnie. And then, you know, she spends the night with him. Then there's the opera. She spends the night again, and then Johnny's home. That's it. That's the whole movie in 4 days.
The whole movie.
4 days.
So my next note, okay, so after the proposal, you just touched on this, they go to the airport because Johnny's leaving to go visit his dying mother. And then there's out of the blue, there's this scene with this old lady where she's like, I put a curse on that plane. It's going to crash into the Atlantic. And like, she goes on for like a minute and a half about this curse and like her sister that she did on her husband, or like she did with her husband on her or something like that.
Her sister stole a man that she was interested in and then confided in her years and years later that she never actually loved him and just wanted to screw with her sister.
Yeah. And so she cursed this plane to crash over the ocean. And then Cher's character is like, I don't believe in curses. And the old lady's like, oh, okay. And then that's
so
the
she
end
goes,
of the
me
scene.
neither.
Yeah. It was just such a,
what is happening?
It was so out of place. And this isn't the only scene like that, but that was probably my favorite of all the completely out of place scenes because it was just so ridiculous.
The big problem with that for me was I just kept expecting the very next scene to be
him crashing.
Cher learning that he's dead. Yeah. I just kept waiting for that to happen. Like, I knew it wasn't going to be immediate, right? Because this is 1987. But like, I just kept waiting for like a news thing to come on or like someone to show up at the front door, you know, and it never happened.
Right. My next note is lots of hand talking, but we've already covered that. Yeah. My next note is, why is his brother not concerned with their dying mother?
Because they have a bad relationship. He said so.
He says that later in the movie.
Yeah, but that's why.
But like at this point, you're like, why is this brother that? So I hadn't watched the rest of the movie when I made this note.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It just didn't make any sense to me that one brother would be flying out to visit his dying mother, but the other brother seems completely unconcerned with it.
Ronnie's a bit of an outcast.
Yeah, something like that. Sweaty tank top Cage is best Cage.
Right.
And I mean, I think between this and Con Air, and there's probably some other ones that we'll get to as we watch all these movies, but
his hair is definitely Con Air.
It is as good. I did like his hair a lot in this movie. It was just like a little bit out of control.
Yeah.
You know, just enough to make him sexy.
But like the way he's like down there in that kitchen, because he bakes at a bakery, right? He's making bread.
Yeah. And in a dungeon, basically.
Yeah, it's underground. So fun fact, that's a real place. And there's still a restaurant and there's a different restaurant now. And those ovens are still in use because they're too big and expensive to move out of the building.
Crazy.
So they're still being used. But that scene, like if that was a modern movie, that's like his Tony Stark in a cave Iron Man scene.
Right, exactly.
You know?
There was a lot of similarities in that scene, except one's making bread and one's pounding iron.
Exactly.
But, you know.
Yeah.
So then we get what might be my favorite introduction to any Cage character of any movie we've watched so far.
Okay. Well, it does come a half an hour into the movie.
Sure. But it's worth the wait. I lost my hand. I lost my bride.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so one thing I was 100% not expecting in this movie was Nick Cage with a wooden hand. I was like, was this before or after Happy Gilmore? Like, I knew it was before, but I mean, I just was blindsided by the fact that this is where I started realizing must just be like basically a straight up comedy.
It had to
is that
be,
it
right?
was so ridiculous that the reason he's estranged from his brother is because he turned to look at his brother and his hand got caught in a bread slicer
Yep.
and he lost his hand,
Yep.
and that his bride left him because of his hand.
Yep. It felt to me like that
That's
type
the
of
whole premise.
that whole writing is like, okay, so he and his Ronnie and Johnny, they're gonna have bad blood between each other. Oh, okay, cool. That sounds great. What's the bad blood? We'll figure it out later.
What's the most Italian place he could work? Oh, a bread factory there, pizzeria or something like that. Oh, okay. Well, what if he cuts his hand off with a machinery there? Oh, perfect.
Perfect.
You know what I mean? Like, and I'll get to, I think I have another note about this later, but like, he makes it seem like he's embarrassed of this wooden hand. Like he tries to hide it a lot of the time, but then he does subtle things that just make it seem like he's not actually that embarrassed of it. Like he's talking to Cher, whom he only just met, and he like starts wiping his face, like scratching his face with his wooden hand.
Oh, when they're back up at his apartment.
Yeah, why wouldn't he just use his real hand to do that if he's so embarrassed of his wooden hand?
I think he's just messing with her.
I don't know if it was messing with her or messing with the audience. I feel like that was Nick Cage like trying to be funny without like indirectly being funny. You know,
but it's such a weird scene because like they go up to his apartment.
Weird.
He lives above the restaurant. He lives above the bakery, and she just starts making a mistake. She's like, yeah. He's like, "What's that?
Yeah, that was weird.
What's that smell? I'm making you a steak."
I feel like that was an Italian thing because isn't there like a stereotype about Italian women wanting to always keep the men fed or something like that?
I don't know. I mean,
or like cooking.
Us
like
Jews
everybody
have jokes about that with grandmas.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting confused across all these things. But if I say too much about it, I feel like I'm gonna like look really bad to any Italians that are listening. So I'm sorry about that. I'm not insensitive. I'm just dumb.
That whole scene's just so odd though, because you know he doesn't want it, and she's like, "Well, you're gonna have it." He's like, "Well, I like it well done." She's like, "Too bad."
Too bad you're getting it bloody. And it's like, okay. And then he's like, "It's real good." He's eating it. No. Also, his accent in this, like it kind of came and went. You could tell this was like fairly early Cage.
Yeah.
And maybe that was part of the character. I don't know, but his accent just kind of came and went. But when he was into it, he was into it. And
well,
I swear that monologue that he had was one of my favorite things ever. I've replayed it in my head. Literally, I just watched this movie last night, and I've been replaying that in my head for the past 24 hours because I loved it so much.
I'm glad because that scene in the bakery got them in trouble because they couldn't get it. They had a really hard time getting that scene and the timing and the blocking and all of that. So much so that they ended up getting fined by the Actors Guild because they were working too many hours and skipping lunch and stuff like that to get this scene down.
Wow.
Yeah. They even pulled the cameras and just started rehearsing it as if it was like a stage performance. And the director, Norman, was just like, I'll bring the cameras in when they get it right. And I'll just fit the cameras wherever they can fit. Because they just couldn't get the scene. Do you agree?
You haven't said much about this scene, so
I thought it was interesting. I was too thrown off by how ridiculous the story was, because I was like I was excited to find out like what's this bad blood, right? Like what did Johnny do, right? This is where we learn that Johnny's like a bad guy, and Cher falls in love, with his brother. But then we find out that like Johnny didn't really do anything at all, and Ronnie is just kind of nuts. And so like I was too distracted, I think, by the practicality of the story over his performance.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's disappointing.
But I love the scene like directly after it where they're in his apartment and they're having the steak conversation, and and then he flips over the table and then he kisses her and she says, no, wait. And then she kisses him. And
wow.
It was a fun little ride,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I preferred the scene before that, but that was a great scene as well. We covered both of my next like 2 or 3 notes. But my next note is birds flying to the stars.
Right.
Which is a reference to, the dad, Loretta's dad, is cheating on her mom. With this random woman that we don't really get a lot of character development for, but
Mona is her name.
Mona. He gives her this charm bracelet that she's just in love with, and I thought was pretty dumb. But then he said it got a bunch of stars and birds on it, and the birds are flying to the stars. And she basically like gets all teary-eyed with how beautiful that is, even though it makes no sense to me. I don't understand what the
Okay,
I
good
don't know.
or not good. I don't know. I had the same reaction. I thought it must be like a metaphor I just didn't connect with.
No, because
So
birds flying to the stars would just die.
you would think so.
No, they would. They would have to get through the atmosphere.
They're special
I mean,
birds.
no, there's no birds that are special enough to do that. Um, who could resist that accent is my next note. So there you go, talking about Nick Cage's accent again,
Yeah.
how wonderful it was. Looks like a giant snowball. I don't, oh, the moon. They're talking about, so this whole movie is based around the idea that like a moon, like a huge moon shows up when two people fall in love or something like that. I didn't really understand the whole gist of it.
I felt like it was the other way around. Like the moon is what helps cause the connection between the people.
Oh, okay.
Right. Because like her aunt and uncle start getting frisky because of it. And there's this whole story about.
Right. But then Loretta and Nick Cage, they get down and freaky and like have this connection before the moon shows up. So
yeah, I mean, that's true.
So I guess it's not really very clear in the movie exactly what the moon does, but it's important. It's in the title and in the opening song and the closing song. And
well, and it's referenced a few times because like her uncle talks about how that's, Cosmo, when Cosmo was first, with Rose and he was truly in love with her, there was this big moon and the uncle was super confused about the whole thing. And it's this really weird story where Cosmo's like, you must have been sleeping. And my first thought was like, you're being a jerk. But yeah, I mean, that story sounds ridiculous. Maybe he was dreaming. And then we get the moon again. Cosmo's moon is what he calls it.
Yeah. And somebody says it looks like a giant snowball. I don't really remember who.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it was just a funny line.
I think it was the uncle.
Probably. And then my next note is big hair, because this is the 80s and there's big hair everywhere. Oh, that was when she was getting her makeover and her hair went from frumpy to fabulous or whatever the tagline said on HBO.
Well, because like so she sleeps with Ronnie. She spends the night with Ronnie, which 1987, she's still living with her family. She's a widow, and like so normally she'd be home, and so she sleeps with this dude. She's engaged to his brother, and he says that he'll agree to never speak to her again, and he won't go to the wedding to cause a scene as long as he can have his two loves at the same time, her and the opera.
Which seems weird for his character. It's like completely opposite of what you would expect him to like love motorcycles or something.
It was so like out of left
instead
field.
It's like the opera.
And I was like, okay,
she had never been to the opera.
She had never been, no. But I was like, okay, well, I guess that explains the music at the beginning of the movie.
I guess. I mean, I think they just wanted to use the song that had the word moon in the title, and that was,
I mean, maybe
Italian.
I did like how so she's very New York. She's extremely New York, and she has to like ask where the Met is. Now, look, I'm not a New Yorker, not really anyway. My mom's from the Bronx, but like I'm not a New Yorker. I feel like you could find the Met if you'd lived there your whole life, because she's 30. She's 37. She says so in the movie. Yeah. But yeah, so she goes to the salon and she's going to get the gray taken out of her hair and she's going to get her nails done and all this other stuff, and she goes from, the frumpy, which I mean, it's Cher. So she looks good, like always. I mean, and then she gets through the montage, the makeup montage.
Yeah. Which every 80s movie had, basically, especially every 80s romantic comedy.
She's turning guys' heads on the street.
So just warning, at least half the notes that coming up here are basically talking about how much I love Nick Cage's performance in this. So whatever. This is a Nick Cage podcast, so I feel like that's to be expected. But my next note is he's over the top ridiculous in this, and I love it. Every scene he's in is just so, like, it feels like it belongs in a different movie.
That's interesting.
It was great.
It was really nice. I loved seeing him in the tux and the jacket and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Waiting for...
Just standing there with his gloved wooden...
Well, and there's that moment, right, where they're like 20 feet from each other. They keep looking the opposite
they can't
way.
find each other.
I'm like,
he's literally looking right at her.
Like, are they really doing this? Are they going to miss each other and he's going to think she rejected him or something like that?
I do want to say, I think that fountain that they show that they're like meeting at, I'm not for sure on it, but it did look an awful lot like the fountain that Dana Barrett and Peter Venkman talk when he does like the weird dancey thing, and he's wearing like the orange, and he calls the guy he calls the guy a name, the date. Oh, who's the stiff or something like that?
Yeah, the trumpet player.
Yeah, it looks like that I think is the same place. I could be wrong. Maybe everything in New York looks the same, but that particular area looked very familiar to me. I think that's where it was from. I don't know. Somebody will correct me on Twitter, I'm sure, if they listen to this, but
okay, we would need listeners first.
Yeah, that's true. All three of you, if that's not true, then please tweet at Derek, not me. Duplicate dinner scene. It's literally almost a beat for beat repeat of the dinner. So you we saw the dinner with the dad from Seinfeld or whatever, or not Seinfeld, Frasier. We saw that earlier, and then there's an almost beat for beat this exact same scene.
Oh, when Rose goes out by herself.
Right.
Yes.
And it's almost the exact same scene, except in this one, Rose is like, maybe you need an older lady to show you the ropes or something like that.
She doesn't say that. She just,
I don't know. It's something like that.
She makes the exact same comment that Loretta makes, which is that the girl is too young for him. They both make the same comment. I think it's supposed to show, this kind of connection between Loretta and Rose and about how they're sensible people and that kind of thing. And Rose is by herself. At this point, she's pretty confident that her husband is cheating on her, right? And she goes out for dinner on her own to this restaurant and witnesses this dude get, I guess, water thrown in his face for the second time during the movie in 2 days.
Yeah, and then he asked for a big glass of vodka from Bobo because apparently everybody knows Bobo.
Everybody knows Bobo. If I was Bobo, I'd tell the dude, can you stop bringing in your students? Because that gets creepy, right? We find out that he's a professor.
That's my next note. Teacher dating students is gross.
Yeah, it's bad. Like, he explains it. He goes in this big monologue to try and justify why it's okay. And like, I mean, I know like it's not 1987 anymore, but I just can't imagine that was like an okay thing back then either. It's just bad. And Rose is just sitting there and listening to it. And she's kind of a dry, sarcastic character throughout the majority of the film, and this dude's just nuts. He's totally off his rocker. Like, yeah, you've been teaching this class for 30 years or whatever and you're bored. Okay, don't teach it anymore, man. If the only thing that gets you through teaching the class is to sleep with your students, I think you need to stop teaching.
Yeah, it seems fair.
Yeah.
Another Nick Cage petting his hair note here. They really let him chew the fat in this movie. Just another reference to how much I love this performance in this movie. I don't know that we need to go beyond that.
Well, because what's happening,
I don't really know what scene that is at that point.
Probably when they're at the opera, right? Because like what's happening all at the same time is Rose is at this dinner by herself where she ends up talking to the professor guy. At the same time, Ronnie and Loretta are at the opera. And guess who else is at the opera? Cosmo and Mona, right? And you have a moment where Ronnie and Cosmo are in line to get drinks together, but they don't know each other yet, so you think that's going to be when it all comes unraveling, but it doesn't happen until the end of the opera. And Loretta and Cosmo have a little thing, well, you're married. Well, you're engaged. Well, what are you doing here? Well, what are you doing here? And they're both we're
both crappy people.
Right. They're both like, all right, forget it.
I already touched on this earlier, but he's supposedly embarrassed of his hand, but keeps using it in obvious ways. But we already covered that. It was just funny to me.
I don't think he's embarrassed. I think he's mad about it. Right? He's mad at his brother because he's not happy.
He's constantly trying to hide it through the movie, except in like really specific circumstances. He puts a glove over it at the opera.
Maybe it's so he didn't have to wear the prosthetic as much.
But I mean, he's still wearing the prosthetic under the glove.
I mean, can you tell?
Yes, the hand looked huge.
Okay. I didn't take that close.
Did you not notice that? I thought that was hilarious.
I didn't really look that closely at the hand. Once I knew it was a prosthetic hand, I guess I kind of stopped focusing on it.
Fair enough.
But
yeah.
I don't think he's embarrassed. I think the problem is like he thinks his life sucks. Now we know very little about it. He's got his own place. He's got a consistent job. That's all we really know about him. We don't know anything else. And so he's just mad that his hand got mauled and his wife left him. And he doesn't know who to blame, right. So he blames his brother.
So next we have the awkward family breakfast.
God, that was awkward.
So Johnny comes home, I guess before this. Johnny comes home looking for Loretta, and she's out at the opera with Johnny.
Well, right. So
Ronnie.
Rose gets walked home by the professor. Okay, his name's Perry, and he's like trying to get with her. Like he knows she's married, and he's still trying to get with her. He keeps talking about how cold he is, and there's, he's like, is anybody home kind of thing, and she's not having it, right? Because she knows who she is. She even has that line about it. Like she's basically, he is her entertainment for the evening. She has no interest in him. She's not going to be, breaking any of her, her vows or anything like that. But then she gets home, and yes, Johnny shows up. He's back. We get to see him land at the airport, and he forgets his luggage like 3 different times, which, like shows like just how much of like an aloof putz he really is.
Yeah.
And he's back. His mother, she's recovered. It's a miracle.
Right. And so he comes back looking for her. She's not there. So then he'll come back tomorrow. So then the next morning they have the breakfast. They have a family breakfast after Cosmo and Loretta found out about each other.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's down there. And then Ronnie shows up.
Oh, and the old man, the grandfather, saw Rose walking with this other dude. They kind of exchange.
So it's just awkward all around.
All around. Everything's awkward.
And then Ronnie comes over, and that makes it even more awkward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then Johnny comes over.
Well, the aunt and uncle show up. So it's like this full table.
Yeah, the aunt and uncle show up.
I thought it was interesting that none of the men offered the aunt a seat. So she's the only one standing while everyone's sitting around eating breakfast.
I think that was kind of purposeful to just kind of show that they don't care that much, or that they're just aloof like Johnny is.
Yeah.
My next note is she didn't make him kneel. So Johnny shows up, and they go through this whole thing, and Johnny says, well, I can't marry you because my mom's going to live.
Well, no. So this part is the only part of the movie that like just logically doesn't work for me. And it's, so he comes in and he's talking about how once he said he was engaged, she had this miraculous recovery. Great. That's awesome. So he can't marry her because then she'll die. What?
Right.
That doesn't make sense.
It's a superstition thing. I got that. But he was being as kind of like numb as he is, or not numb, but aloof, like you said. He has like these superstitions about what will happen if everything like.
But if the engagement brought her back to health, why would going through with the engagement to marriage be a bad thing?
Because of Loretta's bad luck, maybe. I don't know.
It
didn't really make a lot of sense to me either.
Okay.
It just seemed like a convenient way for them to make it so that they're no longer engaged. And they only had 20 minutes left in the movie. They were trying to get rid of it.
We got to wrap this up, guys.
Yeah. It would have been easier just to have this plane crash into the Atlantic Ocean or whatever ocean they said they cursed her to fly into. But yeah, that's not how it works. So whatever.
So the engagement's off for about 3 seconds, maybe less.
And then they're engaged again, Ronnie and her and Loretta. So yeah. And it was fine. He took the pinky ring from his brother again to put on her finger,
which was hilarious.
Did not kneel.
They haven't spoken in 5 years. He's like, "Give me your pinky ring."
But what I will say about Johnny is he really wanted to reconnect with his brother. It was not, and it seemed like I did feel for him. He, as somebody who has a really weird relationship with their brothers, I had that. I had some sympathy for him in that. It was something that wasn't his fault, that his brother was blaming him for, and all he wanted to do was reconnect with his brother, even though his brother's literally engaged, like getting proposed to the woman that he was going to marry. He still wants to be close to his brother.
Right. Yeah. And he gets to be part of all the family stuff because, that's just how it works, right? You're in the family now. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like other than that one line during the dinner, that is not cool. Other than that, he doesn't show himself to be a bad person at any other point.
Yeah. And I mean, really that line, I'm not trying to justify anything, but in 1987, people thought a lot differently. And I'm not saying that makes it okay to say that line, but that line was not nearly as probably frowned upon in 1987 as it is today. We are in a different world today than we were in 1987. I still think it's crappy. I mean, and it doesn't make it less crappy, but it was more of an acceptable thing to say back then. So back then it may not have made him as bad of a person as hearing that from somebody today would.
I honestly think that by the end of the movie, I think that line is meant as a tool to show how Loretta just has kind of given up.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's not who
Probably.
she is. She's not someone to be controlled or anything like that. You know, she's an intelligent, thoughtful, you know, person. And so I think she had just resigned herself. And that was supposed to be a hint of that. But we didn't have enough context yet for that to
Right.
work because it's at the beginning of the movie. But there is one bit that happens at this breakfast, though, that I don't want to miss. And it's when Rose just looks across the table at her husband and just without saying, like, no for other conversation, no other context, just, I want you to stop seeing her. Right. And all, like, that's the communication. You know?
Yeah.
And Cosmo, he stands up and hits the table for some reason. He sits back down and goes, okay.
Oh, I don't think it's for some reason. I think it was how somebody would react. I mean, I feel like I've never cheated on anybody, so I can't say for sure, but I feel like the first instinct for somebody who's been caught doing something like that is to be angry and like defensive. And so I think that was like his like split second reaction was like this fight reaction. And then he like had a second to think about it because he doesn't say anything for a short bit.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then he sits back down and says, okay, because I think that, you know, it took him that his first instinct was to be aggressive about it and fight back and, you know, but then it was, okay, I just need to, you know, say this and be done. So I think there was a good reason for that. And I actually liked that, the way they handled that, because that I feel is somewhat realistic as to somebody that's been married to somebody for that long and knows them that well.
It was just a really cool communication, and Olympia Dukakis plays Rose, and she's just so good in this movie. And it should be noted, by the way, that both Olympia Dukakis and Cher won Best Supporting Actress and Best Supporting Actress and Best Actress, respectively, for this movie at both the Academy Awards and I also think the Golden Globes. So like they were very well recognized for this, and Olympia was fantastic. I loved that Rose character throughout the movie. She was just this really smart and dry, witty, kind of sarcastic character that I just kept like, I was glad every time she was in a scene.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, she wasn't my favorite character. Ronnie obviously was, but
I know,
she was a good character too.
Yeah.
So I said she didn't make him kneel.
Yeah.
That's for, you know, maybe it's growth of her character that she doesn't need that.
Because she really loves him.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's brought up earlier that, like, you know, Rose asks Loretta, like, do you love Johnny? And she goes, no. She's like, well, you like him? Oh yeah, I like him a lot. And then at the end, you know, Rose asks, do you love Ronnie? And Loretta's like, you know, yes, you know. And so I think that's the difference, right? She's not resigning anymore. She loves Ronnie. So she's marrying a man she loves.
Right. So yeah, I said my next to the last note says perfect Italian love story. So maybe? Take that for what it is. Sure. I'm not Italian. I just feel like that's the case. And then we get this weird scene where a camera zooms in on this portrait of two people.
Yep.
And maybe I'm completely off on this, but I have no fucking clue who those people are.
No, there's zero context. Nobody has, like, we have no idea who any of these people are. I assume that it's like maybe Loretta's like great grandparents or something like that.
Right. But there's no context in any other part of the movie that would say that or why it's relevant. So yeah, that's how the movie ends. And I think this is like the fifth or sixth of a Nick Cage movies that we've watched where I've literally gone, what the fuck was that at the very end of the movie based on the last scene and the way it ended.
Now, supposedly those photographs are actually Cher's family photos for what that's
Which is a fun fact, but
yeah,
it doesn't, in the context of the movie, doesn't really.
Even knowing that doesn't help make the scene make any more sense. Like, it's just, here's some photos of random people we have not shown you. Yeah, it's very weird.
Right.
And then it's over.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we get
that's it.
We get the credits that have a couple of photos show up from time to time. And Johnny is with the family, so he gets his happy reunion with his brother.
And then we get the after credit scene where Ronnie puts on the Infinity Gauntlet.
Jesus.
And says, I'll do it myself.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't believe they recast him with Josh Brolin. It's just
ridiculous. It was weird, but hey, you know, got to do it, I guess. Got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Make people happy. Anyway, that's not a real thing.
No,
So
but that's the movie.
That's the movie.
One more fun fact about the movie is that it is one and our first of 4 Nicolas Cage movies that are in the Criterion collection, which is kind of a big deal. There are not a lot of movies that make it to that level. His other 3 movies are Rumblefish, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and The Rock. So obviously, we've both seen The Rock, but so there you go. This is obviously a highly regarded film overall. Your point earlier about IMDb, I feel like movies that came out pre-IMDb's existence get like this exaggerated rating where they're either overscored or underscored pretty heavily because people are thinking about them like out of the moment. They're like, oh, I saw Moonstruck 20 years ago. I loved that movie, or that movie, I saw the trailer for it. It looked like trash, right? Like that kind of thing. And that affects those ratings. So it's kind of hard to take them seriously unless the movie is more recent.
Yeah, that's fair. So I guess we got to rate this thing, huh?
Yeah, we got to rate it. So for those who follow the show, who may not know, just a quick recap, we give every movie 2 different scores. We have a 20-point scale, so 0 through 20, 0 being the low end, 20 being the high end, and we rate the movies on overall quality of film, so 20 being the greatest movie ever made, 0 being trash, and then caginess of a film, 20 being the cagiest movie possible, and 0 being the least cagey movie you could imagine. And so that's how we rate these. And then we post our big Cage-o-meter out on social media that you can see our little, what do you call it? Splatter plot or whatever it's called. Splatter plot, whatever, of all of the movies. So Ryan, let's do this. Quality. How would you rate the overall quality of Moonstruck?
I mean, it's tough because there's a lot of random crap in there that's just like, why is this in the movie? But then, when you take it as a whole, and you come to realize that this is a comedy first and foremost, I think that makes it a better movie having all that random stuff in there. It wasn't something that's been done much since then, or like, I mean, I feel like it might be a stretch to compare it to like Naked Gun movies.
Interesting.
It's not as extreme as Naked Gun movies, but in the sense that like this unexpected thing happens.
There were so many times where I just started laughing. I was like, what the fuck just
like,
happened?
Yeah, the first time he holds up his wooden hand and it's like, what?
Yeah.
And then he explains what happened. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's just so out of the blue. I feel like it's got to be like a 16 or a 17 for me.
Well, which is
it? It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I don't know. What's yours?
Well, no, I want to hear your number, 16 or 17.
No, it's somewhere in there. What's yours? We'll maybe I'll be able to solidify a number hearing what you thought.
All right. Well, I really liked it too. It's a good movie. It's fun. It's certainly different than what I normally watch. They don't make movies like this really anymore. They try once in a blue moon, but they tend to be, holiday focused. It's some type of Christmas movie or something like that. So I really did like it. I don't want to put it at like the top echelon of the movies that we've discussed so far. So I was going to give it a 14.
Wow. Way lower than me.
I mean, not way lower. It puts it above It Could Happen to You. It puts it above The Family Man, by a couple of points. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely enjoyed this more than I enjoyed both of those movies. So I'll say a 16. I think 17 might be a little high, but
okay.
16.
So that puts it at a 15 average. Now, what about caginess? This one's a little bit harder for me. So
this one's way up there, man.
But like he's not in it a lot.
No, but every scene he's in is so over the top.
That's true. So I'm having a hard time knowing how to gauge it because
we don't have like rules written for that.
We don't.
So I mean,
we don't. But like it's just hard when you think about like the movies that we've given high KG ratings to, like obviously, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, or Mandy, for example. Those are very cagey. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, very cagey. But, he's just not in it as much. And so it's just hard to compare.
So for me, I try and take it as like a percentage. So like if he's in 50% of the movie, and within that time he's in there, 100% of the time he's being full Cage, then that's a high caginess to me.
Yeah.
Even if he's not in the movie that much, the amount of time he's in there, he's very cagey. It's his performance. How cagey is his performance, whether or not it's, a lot of lines or one line.
Right. So based on his
and maybe that's different for you. No, I think for me, that's what it is.
I think that's fair to base it off of his screen time, right?
Yeah, because our whole podcast is based on Nick Cage. It's not about...
That's fair.
It is about the movies, but it's more about his performance in the movies.
No, I think that's a fair way to look at it. So what would you give his caginess?
No, I answered first last time, so I think it's your turn.
Oh, man. All right. So, yeah, I mean, there's some great moments in here, right? Like, it's
obviously his apartment scene that you love.
I really love that apartment scene. There's obviously the bread baking scene. There's the proposal, at the end, like when he's asking his brother for the pinky ring. It's just hilarious to me. It was great. I laughed.
The opera
is great. He looks so good in the tux and everything. And the way they're just kind of talking after, and like the speech he gives her, like, so after the opera, when she wants to go home and it's cold and he's trying to convince her to come up with them, and just the way he does that speech, like, it's just, I don't know.
Honestly, all of his like monologues in this are pretty dang good. Like, yeah, I mean, he's over the top with it, but I bought it. Like, it was good. It had some actual substance.
It was kind of wild,
The message had substance.
Or like, after the first night that they're together and she goes in the closet to get dressed and he kind of keeps like opening the closet, like, what are you doing? Like, and I appreciated like that perspective of like, come on, like, we're here, right? Like, this happened.
Yeah.
We can't just pretend it didn't happen. So, I'm beating around the bush a bit to kind of like think this through.
You're stalling.
I'm stalling a little bit. I'm having a hard time. I think I want to put it at...
Just know that the world is not going to end. It's going to continue to revolve around its axis.
No, I know. I think I'm going to give...
No matter what you put it
I think I'm also going to give it a 14 because I think, I rated movies like Leaving Las Vegas higher, Mandy, Unbearable Weight. Those are higher on the caginess scale. And I think this is a little more subdued than those.
Really?
I do.
Okay.
You think this was less so than Mandy or Leaving Las Vegas?
I mean, less so than Mandy, maybe, but I don't think it was less than Leaving Las Vegas. Literally every scene he's in this movie, he's like going full blast. And he wasn't in Leaving Las Vegas.
You think?
I mean, maybe I'm remembering Leaving Las Vegas wrong, but he did a lot of cagey stuff in that movie, but it was not like all of his screen time. There was some serious scenes in that movie.
Oh, but these scenes are serious too.
I mean, they are, but they're done with like this over the top thespian, like...
That's true.
You know what I mean?
What are you going to give it then?
I'm going to put it at like a 17.
A 17?
Yeah, it was really cagey, man. Literally everything he did in this movie was like full blast.
All right.
And if you're putting it at 14, that's fine. We're going to average it out anyway, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, not a problem.
But that's still going to put it pretty high.
It does put it pretty high, yeah. So there you go. So what would that be then? 15 and a half. So there you go. 15 on quality, 15 and a half on caginess. If you want to see where that lands on the Cageometer, go to comingofcage.com. Follow us on social media at comingofcage to find that out. Now, of course, we have to figure out which Cage movie is going to end up joining the Wheel o' Cage now that Moonstruck is off the list. So let's go ahead and enter it into our big machine and randomly select from that. And it's Dog Eat Dog. Dog Eat Dog joins the Wheel o' Cage. If you want to find out what movie we're going to review next, you got to go watch us spin the Wheel o' Cage and pick that movie. Ryan, anything else for Moonstruck?
No, I think I covered it. I really liked this movie. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was different. I'm glad we watched it. And we will be back in a couple of weeks with another Nick Cage movie. Follow us. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching.
I lost my hand.